again. Guys, I'm going to ask you all to come up now as I introduce you, because I am really honored to introduce this panel to you tonight, because when I envision an energetic and resilient Pittsburgh, I see lots of women like these rock stars who are coming up on stage right now. Come on, rock stars. So I'm going to introduce them to you one by one. We have Karina Ricks. Karina, wave, please. Karina is Pittsburgh's first Director of Mobility and Infrastructure. The department, created under Mayor William Peduto, has the mission to provide the physical mobility necessary for the social and economic mobility for all Pittsburghers. She brings passion and vision to her work, inspired by the environmental conservation work of her husband and commitment to a sustainable future for her two young children. She is a graduate of Cornell University, and by the way, a Fulbright Scholar. I would have so led with that one. Karina. And next we have Catherine Egan-Kellerman, right there in the middle there. Catherine is the Chief Executive Officer of Port Authority of Allegheny County, and prior to joining Port Authority, she served at Hillsborough Area Regional, which is called HART in Tampa, in several executive leadership roles. During her tenure there, Kellerman grew ridership by more than 20%. She expanded public-private partnerships with entities like Megabus, Red Coach, and Coast Bike Share, and she launched a regional fare program and much more. Wait till you see what she does here in Pittsburgh. Next, we have Arletta Scott-Williams. Arletta is the first woman and African American to serve as Executive Director of the Allegheny County Sanitary Authority. She began her career at Alcosan in 1984 as a shift engineer. By 1996, she was Director of Operations and Maintenance. In 1997, she concurrently served as Deputy Executive Director. The following year, she was appointed Executive Director. Arletta has worked throughout her career to make sure that all ranks of employment are open, so workers of all backgrounds at Alcosan. The staff of just over 400 employees assembled under her direction is diverse at all levels, starting with the custodial staff, where the newest workers often begin their careers, and leading to the top. Fun facts: a native Pittsburgher, she graduated first in her class from Westinghouse High School, and she earned a BS in metallurgical engineering and material sciences from Carnegie Mellon. She also comes from a legacy of rock stars, including her late aunt, civil rights pioneer Thelma Williams Lovett. Next, we have Mary Conturo. Mary. She is the Executive Director of the Sports and Exhibition Authority of Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. It owns and oversees the public's interest with respect to Heinz Field, PNC Park, PPG Paints Arena, and the David L. Lawrence Convention Center. It is also responsible for facilitating the redevelopment of the land between Heinz Field and PNC Park, where Three Rivers once stood, and 28 acres of the lower hill, where the Civic Arena was located. You know, in Pittsburgh, we always refer to what used to be there. The SCA is also managing the design and funding and will be coordinating construction of a cap to be built over the portion of the Crosstown Boulevard that runs below grade between downtown and the Hill District. The cap will provide a new 3-acre public park in the city. I know a lot of people are really excited about that. And now we also have Christy Woolsey, our moderator here, who is behavioral, and she works at Behavioral Workplace Strategy Lead, and she joined Carnegie Mellon in 2018 as an adjunct professor at the Integrated Innovation Institute. She is a consultant, designer, future strategist, and speaker, focused on identifying the behavioral patterns that have and will continue to appear in response to new technologies. I know Christy's super smart and innovative, and in her role at BCG, she designs future customer and employee experiences in the physical, digital spaces that will support those experiences. So Christy, you can take it away.
Thank you very much. So I do a lot of work around behavioral research, and so before we continue, I will share with you that the human body loses energy after between 60 and 90 minutes. So can I get everybody in the room to kind of just stand up for a minute, spin around, shake, stretch, and that will make this a much more interesting panel. So thank you so much. All right, now we'll get on to the topic. This is the Energy Week, so that was about energy there. So I do want to remind everyone that if you go to slido.com and put in #CMU Energy, it will allow you to ask questions, which will then show up on this lovely iPad that I have next to me. And I can add your voices into the conversation, which would be great. So please, as people are talking, send those questions in. So the first thing I want to do by way of maybe a little bit more introduction and kind of future looking is to ask, we'll go down the line for this question and then we'll bounce around. But maybe to ask each of you to talk about, you all run, kind of lead large organizations, and all of them, you're involved in kind of planning the future and future investments and that kind of thing. And of course, you're balancing budgets and stakeholders and all that kind of practical stuff. But for all of you, energy and energy efficiency plays a role in that. And if you could talk a little bit to how you're thinking about infrastructure and those kind of projects with that lens.
So with the Sports and Exhibition Authority, we're responsible for facilities and building facilities. And some of what we've done is thought about where things should be located, and that they should be located in areas where you don't have to travel far, you don't have to build new infrastructure. So reusing city sites has been important to us. And then building in a way that's responsible, that it's energy efficient, has been important to us. And then what the impact is in the surrounding area has been important to us in how we design and build things, so that we put as little burden on the municipal infrastructure as possible. So stormwater retention is important to us, green roofs and reflective roofs, so that we don't add more than we have to the heat island effect. So it's, although we're not at all involved in generating energy, what we try to do is use as little of it as we can.
So efficiency for us at Port Authority, it saves your taxpayer dollars. The fleet we operate here is about 4 times as large as the fleet I had in Tampa. And spending a quarter, 25 cents less on fuel there was $300,000 per gallon. It would be the same thing here, but by a factor of 4. So the less diesel we have to buy, the more money we save, and the cleaner air is. To the point from the previous presentation, we're at this kind of neat tipping place where electric buses are, on their whole lifespan of 12 years, becoming less expensive than internal combustion engines. So we're bringing 2 electric buses into service later this year to see how they do here in Pittsburgh. And it's less expensive fuel for us, it's less wear and tear on the vehicles, and it allows our maintenance teams to focus less on the day-to-day, how do you keep this running, and focus more on the beautification, keeping it cleaner, keeping it greener at the same time. So we support that. We're also still the most fuel-efficient way, other than walking, to get around. So we provide an efficient service, but we also look at balancing that footprint as well.
So, at Alcosan, for those who are not local, we are the wastewater treatment provider. We create clean water. I just wanted to hear that reverberate. And it is a very energy-intensive operation. We treat 250 million gallons of water a day. When I first got to Alcosan, I vividly remember, this is 35 years ago, I remember the executive director walking around turning out lights. The CEO was turning out lights in a wastewater treatment plant. I didn't get it. I was a young engineer, but it didn't take long because we do use a lot of energy. And as our keynote indicated, every little bit counts. Today, my electric bill is $500,000. That's $500,000. Over what time period do you think that is? A month. Yes, I turned the lights out as the executive director today. And fortunately, I don't have to turn them out as many places because of innovation. There are places across the 60-acre facility where, of course, they're motion censored. We're a 24-hour operation. I don't know, with all due respect to my esteemed colleagues, I don't know how many people rode a bus today. I don't know how many people even thought about going to a sporting event or using the convention center, but I'm guaranteed you used my services in operation 24 hours a day. We'll talk more about the many other things we do, but it is very, very central to everything we do to conserve energy and to recycle. We are your premier recycler in the region. No.
Mic drop, she's done.
So Arletta turns the lights off. I leave the lights on, all 10,000 of them that light the streets of Pittsburgh. So the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure is essentially the Department of Transportation for the city of Pittsburgh. We oversee about a quarter of the total land area of the city, 1,000 lane miles of street, 700 public stairs, 120 bridges, and we move hundreds of thousands of people every day around the city and through the region. But I want to talk maybe a little bit about what really motivates us, and you heard Mayor Peduto earlier today. But you know, one of the things that really drives us is this climate imperative, and really keeping that front of mind with us. I'm sure you know it's speaking to the converted here already, but we heard late last year the UN coming out and saying we are on track for a 3 to 5 degree global temperature change by the end of this century. I have 2 young children. That means within their lifetime, bomb cyclones and flooding and landslides are not going to be rarities. They're going to be commonplace events. And that we are going to have climate refugees, not necessarily from Kiribati and Tuvalu, but from Boston and San Francisco and St. Louis and Miami. These are really real motivating factors. And I know that the department that I'm responsible for is also responsible for a quarter of the energy consumption, global energy consumption from the transport sector. I know that we're responsible for a quarter of the greenhouse gas emissions. So we have a motivation here. The mayor has thrown down the gauntlet and said, I want us to reduce by 50% the emissions related to transportation by 2030. 2030 is 11 years from now. So in 11 years, I need to cut our greenhouse gas emissions by 50%, by the way, from 2003 levels. So the easy things have been done. The difficult things are what are left. And it does mean that we can't nibble around the edges of what will change for energy consumption and for behavioral change, but that it's going to have to be really transformative. It's going to have to be 1900 transformative, because in those pictures that Mahit showed, you know, the thing that stood out to me was not how many horses there were or how many cars there were. It was how many people were walking in those pictures, because I know that that's the single most sustainable mode of transportation. So some of the things that we're really doing is talking about how do we really move people, that goal that he showed of our department, of how do we make walking and bicycling and human transport not just the safest and most efficient way for those very short distance trips, but also the most enjoyable, because it is something that bringing joy back to the work that we do is something that we're focused on.
So I wanted to ask, you know, the world is changing very quickly. Are there any particular trends around energy or energy technology or energy developments that maybe you're not kind of incorporating yet, but you've got your eye on that might be impacting? Not everyone has to answer, but if somebody's got their eye on something and wants to expand on that.
Okay, let's get back to sewage. So, I would say there are some trends that perhaps we missed early on. We, in some ways, have been late adopters. Things as simple as looking at hydroelectric capacity. I'm telling you, we process a lot of water. How can we take better advantage of that? Well, it's something we explored, realized that we couldn't. Natural gas vehicles, again, late adopters. After today, we will be looking at electric vehicles because we do have a lot of vehicles. We're bikers at the plant. We do have electric vehicles, but mostly golf carts. We're catching up.
As we mentioned earlier, we're starting looking at EVs this year. They are still more expensive, but we are hopeful within the next few years we can make a commitment to convert to a completely electric fleet. But that also crashes out the grid, so we are actively evaluating whether or not we can use the CNG, which is local here, to fuel generators at our locations, and then we're not crashing out the grid. So a couple things we're looking at.
Great. So for people involved in mobility, can you talk a little bit about what happens if we go to some amazing mobility thing that ends up like reducing parking revenue? Or like how are you thinking about balancing those kinds of things? And I have a sewage question coming next.
So this is something we've been thinking a lot about because obviously, I'll say that my not very secret agenda is to drive parking to the lowest levels that we can in the city so that we can use that precious resource for housing, for green space, for other amenities for people rather than the storage of private objects in our important land areas. But it does mean that also parking is a significant revenue source. We put together a task force to sort of prepare for the changes that might come with autonomous mobility and connected vehicles, and knowing that public policy moves at a glacial pace, we thought we probably should get started now before, even if it's not for another 20 years, it'll take us that long to figure out what we're doing. So we looked at what is the amount of money that's coming that the city relies on from parking and transportation, private mobility-related generation. And it's about 19% of the city budget actually comes from different sources of vehicle fees. So we do need to have revenue replacement if we're able to move away from parking. But it does mean that we need to look more creatively. We need to look at user fees for the roadways. We need to inspire higher occupancy use, more efficient person movement on our street networks, looking at fees that might charge for using too much space. So if you're driving that 6-person SUV around on the city streets, but there's only one of you in the car, maybe we need to charge that a little bit differently than if you have a microtransit vehicle and you have 11 or 15 people going in that same roadway space. We need to look at how we monetize the curb and the way that people use the curb. I certainly want to prioritize my curbside spaces for Catherine's buses so that the 45 people on her buses have priority over the single vehicle that's parked there for 8 hours. So looking at ways that we can then transition to a more sort of mobility-based financing system rather than just a personal vehicle storage system, and in that way also influence behavior and influence mode choice. The economists tell us that the price is a very good influencer.
And so if I could also add, the revenue is one thing, and actually where the revenue comes from in terms of people coming from outside the city, parking in the city, using the city resources and what our local tax structure is. There's benefits there to being able to raise money from people that are using the resources without actually living here. But the other thing, and Rich has asked me a couple of times, you're still building parking garages, and what happens when nobody's parking in them anymore? And so that's something that we've started looking at. The most recent garage that we've built it, so some garages you'll notice have sloping floor plates. We intentionally built it so that the floor plate was level, so that with some reinforcement, some of the floors in the garage could be changed to a different use, to office or residential, if that became the needs of the area.
Yeah, I've worked on a couple of projects where we were like, okay, we're building a parking garage now, but what will it be remodeled into? So I have a question here for the audience, which is for you, is there any move towards biodigesters to capture energy from human waste?
Excellent question. Not at our facility. I invite you to come to the open house on Saturday, September 21st, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Shameless plug. Our treatment process would not facilitate that, but we do make use of what the process does permit. So, I told you it is energy intensive. We have incinerators. Our incinerators require fuel. Up to about 5 years ago, we used primarily heating oil, extremely expensive. We converted to natural gas. But at the same time, we attempted to make use of the natural, that's the best way to put it, the natural oiliness of sewage. You think about your sink when you have spaghetti, something greasy, your dishwater, the grease floats to the top, right? The grease floats to the top in a wastewater treatment plant. We skim that off. We attempted to liquefy it and pump it into our incinerators to decrease our fuel usage. Yes, we are bright turds. That's, you can take that with you. It didn't work the way we anticipated. My point being, we truly do throw everything against the wall to see if it will stick. Everything.
Okay, so a lot of, as leaders, you can put stuff out there, but human behavior is not easy to change, right? And so obviously one of the motivators is financial. What else are you thinking? How are you thinking about bringing people along the journey with you, if you are? And anyone can address this.
So we see generational differences in how people view transit and how they use it and how they're going to interact with us. Previously we could look at income quintiles and say pretty clearly this quintile will ride this service, this one won't, so on and so forth. But we're seeing a blurring getting down toward millennials and then Gen Z. Yeah, and respectfully, millennials means anybody under 40. That's a lot of adults. They can run for Congress, they can run for president. So I don't want that to be perceived like I'm saying just those kids. It's a big chunk of the population who are much less likely to get driver's licenses. For a whole bunch of different reasons, they are looking at single occupancy vehicles differently. There's less cachet associated with it, so on and so forth. We're also finding that the end of millennials and that Generation Z will make their own business decisions based on their values. And by that I mean if they see a vendor advertise on a bus and they value transit, they're going to go with that vendor. So the economics are still a primary factor, but we're starting to see a shift in what folks other factors too. So it's not just making it the cheapest thing. It's got to be cool, but also super hyper convenient. So whatever the technology evolves into, so 10 years from now where we have haptics under our skin and microphones embedded in our butt, whatever's going on, that all that information is ubiquitous and easily accessible, and very democratic, because again, as we see on the curve that we saw earlier, there's that lag of adoption, and we see this in transit. We love talking about apps for smartphones. Not everybody has a smartphone. So what do you do for folks that don't? You add free Wi-Fi somewhere so other folks can interact. We want an app that lets you pay, but if you don't have a credit card, how do you use that? How do you fill that gap? It's definitely the economics, but how easy is it to use and what can you capture on top of that?
Great. So I want to invite Harmeet to join us. We have an extra chair. I'll move over and make space for you, because we have some questions for you from the audience as well. We can kind of add you to the group here. And actually, while he's coming up and getting settled, we do have a question for the audience about, and anyone can answer this, probably not everyone, but do you engage with small businesses that are maybe exploring new technologies, and how would they work? How would they find themselves having a chance to work with you, or do they have to be proven someplace else?
So I can answer that in part, and in fact, I can do our own city shameless plug, which is this weekend is the Inclusive Innovation Summit for this, right? I got the thumbs up for doing the right plug. Inclusive Innovation, so trying to bring more of the local innovators into the city, finding ways to demo them. I think that the city of Pittsburgh, I've been here 2 years now. One of the things that I really, really love and admire about this city, and much of it I think is to be credited to CMU and the relationship that the city has with CMU, is the boldness of the city to really embrace its role as a public test bed for different kinds of technology. And so making ourselves available and kind of having, I cautiously say the freedom to fail, but allowing some of these innovations to happen, seeing what's happening, does it have legs, can we innovate upon the innovations, and doing it in an iterative way. The city, I think, has really made itself very much available to some of these, and so coming to some of these summits like the Inclusive Innovation Platform, looking through some of the other work. The URA has certain programs that also really are there to facilitate allowing testing in the public space, allowing demonstrations, and using the public infrastructure, the public systems as a way to really look at real life efficacy of some of these innovations. So it is a great characteristic of this city.
Great. So I want to, Anna, do you want to read off some of the questions that have come in for Harmeet? We'll get you to join the discussion.
So there are a couple of questions that have come in that are specific to mobility, which it's a nice bridge between the work that we're doing in Pittsburgh and the work that you're doing. So one of the questions that came over was about overcoming challenges for consumers in adopting electric vehicles, the ease of access to fuel, charging, personal preference, vehicle models, et cetera. What are some thoughts that you would have that you could share with us that we could talk about in terms of how to have more consumers interested in electric vehicles?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of questions rolled into one. Let's take the charging infrastructure first. Right? So we've seen that majority of EV owners, if they have single-family homes, they tend to charge at home during evening or night hours, especially when you have time of use rates. But that has its own challenges, because the time of use rate, you can get your EV charging can be cheaper, but then still have just 1 meter. If you're using your washer and dryers, the peak hours, and it could offset your savings that you get in the TOU charging. But there's still a challenge for the MUD dwellers, multifamily homes. People who live in apartments need accessible charging infrastructure, which is public or semi-private. That's one big sector. Workplace charging. I think the second most popular place to charge after homes is workplace. And then the trend is moving towards a more high-powered, fast public charging, right? So as your batteries are getting longer, batteries are getting larger, and the cars are driving, for longer distance per charge. The expectation for consumers is to get the gas station type of an experience. You stop at, pit stop and get a quick charge, and you can drive another 100 miles, 150 miles. So that's where the trend is moving towards more high-powered, fast chargers that are installed on corridors and public places. Sorry, what was the other part of the question?
So what are we doing in Pittsburgh? Can we talk about charging in Pittsburgh and how that's coming together?
Well, in our garages, we've got 21 chargers. So 21 out of the 5 million you're going to need are taken care of. But why are there different kinds of chargers? Are there going to be like one universal charger like the cell phone, or it's sort of aggravating having to put in different chargers?
It's like the early beta in VHS, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. There are a number of standards. I mean, there's a plug standard. I'm a part of, it's an alliance called Open Charge Alliance, which is working on developing open protocols, right? So one of the, especially given where we are as an industry, it's important to develop interoperable standards that are IP-free, royalty-free. It's easy for anyone to adopt, and lower the barrier to entry. But there are different plug standards. Japanese have their own, and US and Europe have their own. Tesla's got its own proprietary stack. And then there are different levels of chargers. You have AC chargers, which can charge now about, on an average, 7 kilowatt. And then you have your fast chargers that used to be until recently up to 50 kilowatt. But now we're deploying, we've just deployed in California the first 350 kilowatt charger for one of our customers. So on the fast charging side, the charging rates are going really high. But to your question, there's a long dwell charging that would make sense for retail locations where you expect people to stop and plug in their car and then maybe go watch a movie or spend their shopping. And they are going to be there for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. And then there's a second type of charging where you just want a quick stop, got 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and you just want to get as much charge as possible. So they do cater to different use cases, and I think they both present different opportunities.
Yeah, I'll just add to what the city of Pittsburgh is doing. So we are fortunate to be designated a Bloomberg Climate Action City. Part of the plan with that award is that we will work first to electrify the city fleet. So the city, of course, owns a tremendous number of vehicles. So to the extent that we can convert the light-duty vehicles, passenger vehicles, to electric vehicles, we've begun the transition toward an electric fleet, building the charging infrastructure at the municipal lots, working with the Pittsburgh Parking Authority, which also has charging infrastructure there. But the next logical step to that is to look at where are the opportunities on the public curbsides where we're talking a lot about charging of electric large vehicles, but one piece that we'd like to look at is the introduction of micromobility in the city. And so this is e-bikes, pedal assist for people like me who are a little bit intimidated by these hills. Get a little boost on the bike, need to have some charging for that. You've seen perhaps the Scooby scooters, the electric motor scooters that are back as of this past weekend in the city. And then should there be action in Harrisburg, e-scooters that could also be introduced into the city. And these too need charging, and they do add vehicle miles traveled to take these micro-mobility vehicles off of the streets back to private homes to charge. But can we look at multi-purpose electric charging facilities that might be available for both conventional vehicles as we think about them, automobiles, but also micromobility vehicles, and seeing how we can use the public space in ways that make sense to provide electric charging facilities throughout the city for those purposes.
Great. So we're actually coming to a close. Thanks, everybody, for the questions that came in, and thanks to the panel. And as a way of kind of closing out, maybe I'd like for each of you, the pictures were fabulous of the automobile with the horses and then the one horse with automobiles. That was great. If you think 10 years out, is there a vision that you have, that we can kind of look forward in the city of Pittsburgh or in the mobility space, something that you'd like to see happen? 10 years from now, we pull this panel together and say, what's the most amazing thing? Don't you hate when moderators ask questions like that without warning you ahead of time?
Well, I can start, just because I think that we've been doing a lot of thinking about this, for speaking only as myself. 10 years out, we'd like to see 50,000 more people in Pittsburgh really beginning that renewal back to the city. And I'd like to see 90% of those short trips, the trips less than 1 mile distance, to be in walking and bicycle transport, so that we can really eliminate those trips from our grid, free up the space in our roadway, and address some of the longer trip capacity needs. Maybe we'll give a few more bus lanes to Catherine so that she can operate more efficiently those higher capacity vehicles.
Well, 10 years from now, more people flushing with the opportunity to take and reuse in every conceivable way everything that comes from and through that process. And that's not facetious. That's not a joke. I'm telling you, daily, we are looking to make that happen. We are a landlocked facility. Because of that, we have river on one side of that. On one side of us, we have a hillside with a railroad track on the other side. We go to a point where there's no place to go. There is a state penitentiary that might be available on the other side of us, but we have to do everything we need to do for the county within that footprint and make it right. That's what I'm looking for.
Well, on a personal note, hopefully our older son will be getting ready to apply to CMU at that point, God willing. He's 6, okay, so it's not like he's 15 and he's going to be taking that long. And he wants to be a robot scientist, so we're excited. Transit-wise, we're going to go big, okay, so 24-hour-a-day operation throughout the city in the urban areas. You don't have to wait more than 10 minutes in rush hour, maybe 20 minutes off-peak. You can get anywhere you want with one transfer. There's no transfer fees. We have an equitably priced day pass that you can get on your phone or anywhere else. Strong, complete streets corridors out to places we don't go now. And we own the Pennsylvanian, and we turn it into a downtown hub. So all the routes can come together in one place, and there's fewer buses, but you're happy to see the ones that are there.
I would just sort of reiterate a lot of this, that a very walkable city, that very pleasant to walk in, meaning probably more greenery than we have right now, and really to be able to live in the city without owning a car. So really having a lot of choices in transportation.
And Harmeet, from where you sit?
Yeah, I mean, I think I totally agree with everything that has been said, and 10 years from now, I think we'll see these trends shared, autonomous, electric, and connected, taking off, pedestrian-friendly cities, and I think that the city of Pittsburgh, with their the 4-pronged strategy, is just really happy to see that how the city is going about decarbonization and efficiency, and I really hope that the city of Pittsburgh is able to lead by example and becomes a model city for the other mid-sized cities in the country.
Right. Thank you for a fantastic discussion and for the work that you are all doing to bring us into that future.
So a quick additional round of applause also for Christy. Thank you very much for moderating the panel. And for Tracy Serto, also for helping with the introductions this evening. Rich, thank you for staying through the whole thing and for having, obviously, you have a great connection to all of this that's happening too. So thank you for your support. They're amazing. So I am so pleased to have you all here with us tonight. So thank you again. We are actually at the end of our day today, believe it or not. I know some of you have been here with us since 9 o'clock this morning. We are starting tomorrow at 9 o'clock with breakfast, and our first session is at 9:30, so we will see you back here. Food tomorrow morning when you arrive will be on the other side of that wall in Rangos 3. Have a delightful evening, and let's give another round of applause for our amazing panel and moderator. Thank you.